Within a considerably short period of time, cinema has become a pivotal element of not only popular culture, but conveying societal and personal perceptions in relation to issues past and present. Similarly, they are a central form of escapism from the tribulations of everyday life. They allow us to envision ourselves in fantastical scenarios with heroes we aspire to be, whilst we design our own idealistic outcomes to the plot. As such, they have the unprecedented power to shock, horrify, and ultimately engage the viewer. Within this film, I will conduct an exploration as to the origins of film, and how these have evolved to create the equipment and procedures that we have today. Founded in the late 17th century, the magic lantern was an innovative form of displaying images to an extensive audience as opposed to a small group. At its inception, it was primarily used as a form of escapist entertainment for the masses. It was accessible for everyone, meaning the rich and the poor could enjoy it the same without fear of being ostracised for being seen watching it. Within remote, less economically developed regions of Africa, it has continued to be utilised as a method of education. Despite its popularity and revolutionary status, its inventor remains unknown. In a sense, its ambiguity adds to the attraction. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, a contraption had been created for the greater good, as opposed to financial gain and fame. In terms of its functionality, a concave mirror was used to reflect light from a bulb through a small hole at the front of a machine. Hence, an enlarged version of the image can be seen. Initially, the illustrations were drawn directly onto the glass slide, making the process time-consuming. Realising the potential for expanding the number of the Magic Lantern's viewers, copper plating began to be used. Unlike its predecessor, this meant the outline was simply printed onto the material, allowing for mass production. Its use within storytelling was unparalleled. Suddenly the tales that the public had grown up with came alive. For the first time ever, their interpretations could be enhanced by visual aids, other than the sketches available in the more expensive of books. The most memorable scenes within each novel were drawn out, making them instantly recognisable to those who had both read the story or were merely aware of the subject matter. For example, the ghosts visiting Ebenezer Scrooge were constantly recognisable as being from A Christmas Carol, and so on. By layering and moving the slides, and using multiple lanterns, it could appear that movement was present, a fantastical and unique display for all those watching. Never before had anyone had the opportunity to witness something like this. In an advancement upon this, the former trope zoetrope and praxinoscope utilised the theory of the persistence of vision to give the illusion of movement. In regards to the former, a length of string was attached to each side of a circular cutting of card. On one side, an image was drawn of a fish, for example. It would be turned over and a second, upside-down illustration would be created of a fishbowl, say. When spun with the assistance of the strings, the two pictures would combine, making it appear as though they had been one for the entirety of the process. Working on the same fundamental ideology as the phenixoscope, the zoetrope was not only convenient, but its design allowed a number of people to view the spectacle at one time. Opposed to its predecessor, which displayed pictures on a circular rotating disc, the illustrations were drawn onto a paper strip. In regards to being watched, this was to rest against the internal surface of the bottom section of an open-top drum. On a rotating base, the contraption is spun. Resultant of the persistence of vision, those looking through the slits see each image spontaneously replaced by the next. The phi phenomenon is accountable for the appearance of animation. The faster the device moves, the more flawless the sequence. Succeeding this was the praxinoscope. Invented in France by Charles-Emile Reynard in 1877, this expanded upon the mechanisms of the zoetrope. Lining the interior of a rotating cylinder with a strip of images, the viewing slits were discarded and replaced by a circle of mirrors. These were positioned so that the pictures appeared to be relatively stationary as the wheel spun. Resultant of this, the viewer would see a hasty succession of images, giving the impression of movement. This was clearer and less distorted than of its counterpart. Renowned for his innovative photographic and film studies capturing movement, Edward Muybridge is considered to be one of the most influential individuals in the early media field. As a young man, he immigrated to the United States before becoming a bookseller. Several years later he returned, learning the wet plate collodion process. This secured him at least 2 British patents. Preceding this, he once again returned to San Francisco, with his large photographs of Yosemite Valley making him famous. Today he is known for his work regarding animal locomotion. He used multiple cameras to create stop-motion photographs, and his zoopraxiscope, a contraption for projecting moving images, which preceded the perforated strip used in cinematography. By continually photographing a horse racing, the world was able to witness each action involved within the creature running, proving that at least one point all 4 of its hooves left the ground. When relayed at speed, it seemed to show the animal running. What made this so revolutionary was the fact that it was no longer up to the individual to control the outcome. That was the job of the operator of the zoopraxinoscope. Throughout the 1880s, he reached his peak level of productiveness whilst working at the University of Pennsylvania. At this point, he developed over 100,000 images of what we would consider to be indistinguishable patterns of movement. He went on to give demonstrations and lectures. The Lumiere brothers are acknowledged for being the first filmmakers in history. They painted the cinematograph, which, in juxtaposition to Thomas Edison's peep show kinetoscope, enabled multiple audiences to view the picture as opposed to a singular individual. Having been born in France, the brothers attended La Martiniere, the largest technology study centre in Lyon. Their father owned a photographic firm for which the pair both spent time working for, Louis as a physicist and Auguste as a manager. The former made numerous enhancements in regards to the industry, the most notable of these being the dry plate process, one of the initial and potentially largest steps towards moving images. Upon the retirement of their father in 1892, the duo first began to voyage into the previously unexplored realm of motion pictures. They designed a plethora of inventions, the most distinguishable of these being the film perforations as a method of enhancing the speed and quality of the film being passed through the camera and projector. The first footage recorded on their prototype was of workers leaving the Lumiere factory. Unlike Muybridge, this was the first true motion picture. By using 35mm film with 16 frames per second, they were truly recording occurrences as they arose. There was less of a need for rehearsals, as this was a record of life itself, hence spontaneity and naturalism could be desirable. This inevitably changed once this became a form of entertainment. In the year 1902, Edwin S. Porter, an American filmmaker, created what is considered to be the first stretch of edited footage, The Life of an American Fireman. The techniques used within this are thought to have been better utilised within his second movie, The Great Train Robbery. For the first time in history, cross-cutting, double exposures and camera movement were used. Cross-cutting between a number of scenes allowed the viewer to comprehend the scenario further by seeing action taking place in several locations. It is still being used within modern cinema. This demonstrates the significant impact that it had on the media world. Its innovative and genius nature would mean that we are able to create a depth within our films which would be impossible otherwise. If we could not cut between scenes or locations, how would we uncover the backstories of the characters or the events taking place simultaneously or previous to the action that we are viewing?